If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Amy, you're watching the HBO series Chernobyl. I am as well.
Oh, did you watch Monday's episode yet?
I did.
All right, do not spoil it for me.
I won't tell you how it ends with Chernobyl.
Well, just saying that certain episode.
I get it.
I mean, it's really chilling, and it's hard to sleep after you watch an episode of that. You have to decompress and think about, look up where the closest nuclear plant is to you.
Well, nuclear plants are safe, but
yeah, we have a different.
Andrew Sullivan has a great write-up about Chernobyl. Interesting from his perspective, as certainly coming from the left, generally speaking. He writes that the series is a classic fight against time, is a disaster flick. Right, that's what it is. But what makes it fascinating is its depiction of how a communist state reacts to such catastrophe. There is zero institutional concern for human life because individuals only recount as threats to the system rather than ends in themselves. In a mandatorily atheist communist world, there are merely bodies, not souls, usefulness, not dignity. And without anything like a free press, the inhabitants of the nearby city know nothing for days except that there has been a fire and an explosion at the plant. So they stay put, hoping for the best, wondering why their sons and husbands and fathers are taking so long to end their work shifts. Hundreds of thousands have their lives potentially shortened because the big lie comes before everything else. They lie about everything. And Sullivan goes on to say, it gives a more charitable view of socialism than I would, but as Lenin said, communism is just socialism in a hurry. But it's still worth noting what Sullivan has to say, particularly to millennials and Gen Zers. Socialism is not communism, writes Sullivan. Far from it. It can be democratic. Fear can be absent. Individual freedom profoundly attenuated, but still there. Yeah, well, generous. But neither is it social democracy, a capitalist system with a solid welfare state that takes care of its people. Socialism is currently fashionable among the young, who understandably have come to see late capitalism as a failure in improving their lives. But I wish these millennials and Gen Zers could have some understanding of what living in a socialist society is like. The texture and mood of Chernobyl gives an exaggerated but real sense of it. So for the Gen Zer or millennial in your life who's upside down,
have them watch Chernobyl.
Seriously. And
I'm going to have Peyton and Eli watch it.
I have them read Andrew Sullivan, too, while you're at it. And also have them listen to Stephen Moore while you're at it, too.
And also have them listen to Dan Proft.
Yeah, exactly. Got a lot of work for those Gen Zers and millennials to do. Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, not any chief economist for CNN anymore. He shed that title. But Wall Street Journal columnist and noted economist Steve Moore joins us again. Steve, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, guys. Hey, it was good to see you at the Heartland Institute last week.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dan, for emceeing that event.
It was a great talk.
I just want I may have misheard you, but I want to correct you on one thing about Chernobyl. By the way, that documentary is just taking everything by storm. It's amazing. It's the new Game of Thrones. I think you had said, well, nuclear power is not safe. It's not nuclear power that's not safe. It's communism that's not safe.
No, I said nuclear power is safe.
They wreck everything that they touch. And, it's so interesting because the left, which is so into environmental protection and we can't emit any carbon in the atmosphere and all these things, it's crystal clear that the countries in the world that have done by far the most damage to the environment are the communist countries. East Germany, the Soviet Union, all of those countries, they just polluted like crazy. They didn't care about the environment. And you put it very well, Dan, that the one thing about communism is it completely denigrates the rights of the individual, and that's why there was this massive cover-up, and they didn't even care if thousands of people died at Chernobyl.
Yeah, little known fact, I think, because it goes unrecognized, but it's worth noting. Illinois has the most nuclear power plants of any state in the nation, and so no, I understand nuclear. Yeah, I understand nuclear is clean and safe. I understand.
Well, when I was in high school, my mother, who was a hardcore conservative, had this license plate that said more people died in the back seat of Ted Kennedy's car than at 3 Mile Island. So there have been a lot of things. I mean, nuclear power is actually, in the United States, a very safe form of energy.
Yes.
And when you take into account, all the birds that are killed by windmills and things like that, it probably does less damage to the environment.
Doing some damage to the economy is Trump's trade policy, Steve. Yes, we're going to talk about it. U.S. footwear industry, 172 footwear companies sent a letter to Donald Trump saying, please stop. He wants Trump to remove footwear from the list of Chinese imports to be hit with additional tariff of up to 25%, saying that it's going to be catastrophic for our consumers, our companies, and the American economy as a whole.
As a soul, right?
Yes, very nice.
Look, you and I have had this argument week after week, and I just think Amy's going to have to be the adjudicator here. But, I'm with Trump on what he's doing on China. I think China is completely out of control. This is not the greatest time for Trump to have a trade war. I am worried about what impact this will have on the U.S. economy. I mean, footwear industry is a good example, and there are other. I talk to people who are in manufacturing to say it's because of the supply chains now that are so global. This has hurt their business. So I'm not going to argue with you, Dan, that this has not hurt many American companies. It has, and it will cost American consumers more. The question, and Amy, I'm pleading with you to take my side on this, isn't, we are in an abusive trade relationship with a country who, not just in terms of trade, but what they're doing with respect to cyber espionage, what they're doing with hacking into our computer system.
Yeah, they're stealing our intellectual property.
Isn't it time we stand up to Beijing?
No, now is not the time. Especially with an election in 2020. No, absolutely not. It's not only, shoe manufacturers, car manufacturers, the firework owners in Indiana. I don't know if you've heard this, but they spoke out yesterday. It's hurting their business too.
John Deere
and eventually,
in
Moline. And eventually they're going to have to pass the costs off to the consumers, which is us. So all that I'm saving with just hear me out. All this, money that I'm saving with tax.
Okay, so Amy,
with Trump's tax
Amy,
cuts.
I hear you. Now my question to you, I know you're supposed to be doing the interview here. But what do we do then? I mean, we're in a situation where China is acting like a hostile power against the United States. They are the second largest economy in the world. They're cheating, they're stealing, they are involved in all sorts of nefarious acts against the United States.
Right, but isn't there another way to do it without?
They're Red China. We're up against Red China again. They've moved so far away from freedom and free enterprise there. I just worry that if we just back down, the abuses are going to get worse.
But okay, and so will the penalties in the interim. China story out of the UK yesterday that China is now threatening to halt the supply of rare earths, chemical elements used in everything from high-tech consumer electronics to military equipment. And that.
Okay, so I've got a great one on this.
Okay,
Stan. I'm glad you.
All right.
I'm writing my column on this, so I'm glad you brought up rare earths. It's actually, believe it or not, it's something I know about.
Okay.
So you know what country in the world has by far the most rare earth minerals?
What?
Russia.
The United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
We have more of this stuff than China. We have more of it than Russia. We have more of it than Saudi Arabia. And guess what? We produce almost none of it. And why is that?
Environmentalists.
Because there are so many mining restrictions in the United States put in place by radical environmentalists that we now it's insane. We have to depend on China and Russia for rare earths that, by the way, without rare earth minerals, ladies and gentlemen, you can't have green energy. You need it for solar panels. You need it for windmills and so on. And
right.
It is outrageous. We should have a national security policy that says let's go and mine that stuff in Wyoming and Montana and Colorado, where we have way more of this stuff. It's actually a total outrage. It's ridiculous that we're not supplying them. These are critically necessary minerals, not just for energy, but also for our national security issues and so on. Why aren't we producing this stuff here at home?
Well, that's a good question and a good point, but here's the response to that. Where's the strategic vision then? If you want to escalate, you know where China is going to go. They're going to hit us where it hurts, and this is one of the areas. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to go to the mat on this, then be prepared for the response you're going to get from your enemy and adjust accordingly ahead of time. As Amy points out, and I think she's right to do so, to me, this is the issue that could derail Trump's reelection, his trade policy. If this persists and the economy starts to slow, then it's just his personality, and his personality alone is not enough to win.
Well, that's for sure.
The economy, the economy and his economic performance is.
Yeah, Now, look, I mean, you and I totally agree on that. And if Donald Trump is reelected, and I think he will be, it will be because of the booming economy. And you are also right that the China trade war is hurting the economy, no question about it. And it may tip the economy. I don't think we're going to go into recession, but it can really slow this, enormous growth rate we've had. So it's a dangerous game. We talked about this last week, Dan. I'm worried that what's going to happen in Beijing. But let's not forget, as much damage as it's doing to us, it's doing way more damage to the Chinese. I mean, the Chinese are feeling four times the impact of this than we are, but they're patient people. They don't care what if this puts 1 million people in their unemployment lines. They don't care about people. And so I do worry, Dan, I'll have to concede this point, that President Xi just sits back and said, we'll just wait this guy out. We'll take Joe Biden as president. I mean, Joe Biden doesn't even think that China's a threat to the United States. He thinks they're a friendly power. Who do you think the Chinese want in the White House in 2021? Donald Trump or a rollover like Joe Biden?
Well, exactly. And that's why I keep beating this drum, is because that's something I don't want to see, and I know you don't want to see it either. And so at some point you have to make a pragmatic decision based on, the time crunch you're under, and he's under a time crunch.
Okay, so what does he do? You're Donald Trump's economic advisor for the day, Dan. You're going to the Oval Office in the White House, and you're going to tell Donald Trump to do what?
Well, I mean, what I would tell him to do is what he should have done at the beginning, but I know he doesn't.
No.
Support this philosophy.
I mean, you can't say, oh, well, we should have done this. We are where we are today.
It's the same advice. You know what I'm going to do? If they won't do a deal the way that I originally conceived it, then we're going to hurt China even more than we're hurting them now. And you know the way we hurt China even more than we're hurting them now? We drop all our tariffs. We let them impose punishment on their consumers, and we benefit ours. We grow people's household incomes by increasing their purchasing power, and we grow manufacturing and in the textile industry and farming by dropping our barriers and exposing the communist contradictions of the Chinese.
You sound to me like Neville Chamberlain, peace in our time.
Oh, now you've done it. Those are fighting words.
Proft isn't a teaser.
Romance is done.
Oh, that's it.
But regardless of what happens, how are we going to stop them from stealing our intellectual property? I mean,
Well, that's a tough one, I have to admit, because they don't. The thing about the Chinese, they don't have any sense of number one, they don't keep their word. They don't have Western values about property rights and right of contract. It's very difficult, Amy. I mean, you're asking the right question. How do we enforce property rights? And by the way, the interesting thing about patents, intellectual property, is now China is actually applying for all these patents, because they're actually starting for the first time to invent things. And now they're going to ask us to honor their patents when for 30 years they've never honored ours.
Well, here's the alternative then. I mean, if you don't want to be straight with the American people, and if you don't want to follow the laws of economics, fine. Then just go to the WTO, get a judgment against the Chinese for unfair trade practices. It won't be. Well, wait a second. Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish.
Oh, we're going to stop Japan in 1940 by going to the United Nations. Come on. WTO doesn't.
I know.
Anything.
That's my point. To come up with a predicate.
We should have never let them in the WTO. They've violated
wait a second. Wait a second. We are where we are. You just said we are where we are. That's my whole point. Find a flimsy predicate, a disingenuous one, but a predicate to get out of this trade war, and that's it.
All right. Okay, Neville.
All right. Okay. All right.
We're going to win. We're going to get a deal before the end of the year. It's not going to be a great deal. The trade war will be over. The economy will boom, and Donald Trump will win re-election.
You keep pushing back
and
your.
I'm giving you a Trump 2020 bumper sticker, Dan. And Amy, I'm getting one for you too.
You keep pushing back your deadline of when this is going to happen, but okay. Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist and economist. Steve, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
See you guys. Have a great week.
Take care.
You too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. On AM 560.